Original.
Hello, and welcome to Webcrawlers, the podcast where we do a deep dive into some of our favorite mysteries. Each week, we will introduce our topic, lay out our research and findings, reveal some conspiracy theories, and conclude with our own hypothesis. I'm Allie Siegel, and I'm so excited. Today, we have the most special of guests, the man with the smoothest voice in podcasting. Tana, and also Rosie, who is wearing a Snuggie.
New sponsors.
It's actually a comfy.
Very different.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. If you're snuggy, cozy, comfy, whatever, and want to support our podcast, please just do it because we would love to have you. Dan, tell us a little. I mean, everyone knows you, but tell us a little about yourself. You have a podcast. What do you tell us?
I mean, well, my social security number is.
Yeah. What's your mom's maiden name?
I don't know. There's not much to tell. I'm just a person that really likes spooky stuff and talking about it, I guess. And loves this podcast. And I'm so honored to be here. And congrats to Melissa on the baby.
She had her baby, and she is beautiful.
It's a real cute baby.
Yeah, it's a very cute baby. You have your own podcast, right? Or do you still have it? Or
yeah, we don't consistently put out episodes, but we do. We actually just put one out pretty recently for the season, But yeah, it's called Ghoul Talk, and I do it with my friend Lindsay. She used to be in Chicago, so we were also a Chicago podcast, but now she's in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. So we just do it remotely, and, whenever the mood strikes us, no ads, because we don't make any money off of it. So it's, it's just for the love. We hardly do either,
so yeah. We're not raking in that much ad cash. Right. Rosie, what about yourself? Tell us all things Rosie.
Oh, well, I feel very honored to have been chosen to accompany Dan in their telling of this this tale. I don't know. I don't have a podcast or anything. I have a lot of ideas.
Well, get out.
I have a lot of ideas for good podcasts, but I don't do them. I am a nanny. That's mostly what I do. I hang out with babies all day long.
I was going to say, what age?
An 8-month-old and almost 3-year-old. She's going to be 3 this month.
Wow. So baby.
Yes. It's literally the greatest job in the world. I love it so much.
That's really beautiful. I've only held one baby in my entire life.
Wow.
Fun Allie fact. I'm terrified of babies. I would love to have children, but I want it to be born age 6.
Yeah. Are you going to get to hold Miss Ripley?
I hope so at one point, but I'm honestly so scared, with COVID and everything, I don't want to go near a baby.
Yeah.
Even though I know there's COVID testing and things like that. I don't know. Hi, Asher. I'm just terrified of everything, I would love to hold Ripley. I don't know. I feel like babies are made of Jello. I'm scared.
I feel like they're sturdier than you expect. I have you can't drop them, but I feel
writing it down.
You can they're a little bit more. They're durable. They're resilient. But I understand the fear. You might want to wait a couple months until she can hold her head up on her own.
I think that's what I want to do. I need to wait it out until it's a little easier for me. All right, Dan, Rosie, take the reins from me. I'm done with this job. This is yours now. You are the captain now. Tell us, what is our episode about today?
So, if you just want to check back in 40 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to go clock out. I'm going to go walk the dogs, have some lunch, take a shower.
So yeah, this is like my pet thing that I've been obsessed with. I want to talk about the true story that inspired The Exorcist, the film and movie. Yeah.
And just so everyone knows, I'm pretty sure there is a documentary about this on Discovery Plus.
Oh, okay. I haven't actually seen that, so I should watch that probably I should probably watch that before this. But.
No, it's okay. And Snuggie, Discovery Plus, Comfy, if you're listening, we're all open to ad sales.
Pazuzu.
Yeah, Zuzu, anyone.
Pazuzu could sponsor. Yeah.
All right, get into it.
Okay, yeah. So, in 1971, a writer named William Peter Blatty published a novel that would go on to terrify millions of people when it was adapted into the seminal 1973 film of the same name. The Exorcist scared the shit out of people famously, though possibly apocryphally, making people faint and vomit in the theater, not just because it was a story about demonic possession of a child with terrifying visual effects and vulgarity that was shocking to audiences of the time, but also because of 5 little words that accompanied most media coverage of the film when it was released. Based on a true story.
God.
Boats. Yeah, so... and, that a lot of stuff says that, and to the author's credit, I don't think he really pushed that too much, but when people found out that that was the case, they really
Yeah.
So that's, not that I really feel the need to be fair to William Peter Blatty, but, yeah, so, but I was always interested in this because I heard a lot about it growing up where I did and wanted to know what the true story was behind it and how it differed from the novel and the film. And also what I later found out was how the supposedly true story that had been told for decades was actually later found out to be incorrect in many ways too.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Fun fact before we get into it is one of my parents' first dates was to actually the Exorcist movie.
No.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and they told me they were so scared after they saw it that they slept in my dad's living room on the couch with all the lights on because they were too afraid to go in the bedroom and sleep in the dark. They were that afraid after seeing this movie. So this was a real thing. People were terrified when this came out.
Allie, have you seen it?
Yes, I have seen it. And it stands up.
Because I have not seen it.
Oh my God. Well, there's a few. It goes off the rails.
Yeah.
Exorcist 3 is one of the craziest, bizarre movies. Have you seen Exorcist 3, Dan?
No. Only the original one. Yeah.
It goes off the rails, but Exorcist 1 is fantastic.
Yeah, I had an ex who was watched it at too young of an age. She watched it when she was 7 or 8 or something. And you know how you have that movie and then it's okay, I'm never watching that again.
Yes.
She was a film studies student and one of her classes was gonna watch The Exorcist and she was I have to call in sick that day. I can't go see it.
Yeah, she dropped the class.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. She wouldn't watch The Exorcist.
Never got her degree.
Yeah. Watch that. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's an interesting date movie choice, but
probably not a good date movie.
Yeah, and this I feel great segue into talking about the plot synopsis just for people who haven't seen it. Rosie,
yes.
I will say that its stories on the center. Oh man, this is good stuff. The story centers on the McNeil family who are living in Georgetown, which is a neighborhood in Washington D.C. The mother is named Chris, and she's played by Ellen Burstyn. She's shooting a movie in Georgetown. And for some reason, there's a Ouija board in this house, and her daughter, Reagan, who's played by Linda Blair, starts playing with it, and then they start having noises and weird stuff in the house. She thinks there's rats in the attic, and then Reagan begins acting very strangely, and it turns out that she's possessed by a demon named Pazuzu, future sponsor, hopefully.
Yes.
And Chris, the mother, enlists the help of these 2 priests from Georgetown University, Father Karras and Father Marin, who is the titular exorcist. And then that's, and then they do their thing. And so Blatty would go on to tell interviewers that he was inspired to write this novel as an undergrad at Georgetown University when he saw a story in the Washington Post about a local boy who had been haunted and subsequently had an exorcism performed on him. And that was published in August 20th of 1949. So that news story that inspired this story itself contains several erroneously reported facts that became the sort of bedrock for how the true story of The Exorcist was told for decades, both locally and nationally. And, I'm a insufferable, pedantic history person. So I feel the need to really, get into the, yeah.
I haven't read your whole document yet, but do you get into who Pazuzu is? Because I just Googled.
No. So yeah, and that's part of it. Like Pazuzu is totally. I mean, he's not an invention of Blatty. Obviously, it's based on a real deity, but Pazuzu was never implicated in the IRL possession. He's fully innocent. I don't want to, slander his good
Pazuzu
name.
Innocent.
Get into any legal trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, Pazuzu, don't sue us or anything like that. So just us. To let everyone know, it says Pazuzu is an ancient okay, let's try this again. Pazuzu is an ancient Mesopotamian deity. He's a wind demon. A fart demon.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say he's got that IPS.
Yeah, he's a fart demon. And it says he has many connections to other wind deities. Like, is he bad? What's his?
I was going to say, how many wind deities are there?
Apparently a lot.
They had their priorities straight.
I know, seriously. He has two chief aspects. Firstly, as a demon of the home, as a domestic spirit. And then it talks more about the wind. So I don't know. Like, he's really demon. Into wind. Yeah, he's an indoor kid. So Pazuzu's an indoor kid, and his favorite weather is the wind.
Windy. Okay.
Continue.
All right.
He likes long walks on the beach. He's a Taurus. Ooh. And he likes inside and the wind.
Yeah. You get to see him for 1 second in the movie, I think. So look out for that if you watch it. So this original reporting did get some facts right. It did indicate that the real story didn't actually take place in D.C. It was shot on location there. There's this famous filming location there called the Exorcist Stairs, which is where I guess I shouldn't say what happens in case spoilers, but there's some stairs there. And
you could do spoilers for The Exorcist. If you haven't seen The Exorcist, yes, that's on you.
Yeah. No, it's more like 40.
Yeah.
Way more than that.
Wait, anyway. What year did you say it came out?
73, I think.
Yeah, that's 50 years next year.
No, because I'm not that old.
Because my parents were born in 1970, and they're 52.
You're like, I don't want to spoil it for anyone. It came out yesterday.
In case you're planning on watching it, spooky season this year. So the real story actually took place outside of D.C. in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is where I grew up and where I currently live. Don't dox me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so it was just something that, as a kid, I was also raised Catholic by very religious parents, and so it's just one of those things that I feel like I was constantly being told about. Way before I ever saw the movie, it was just this thing that had happened very close to home while my parents were alive, and all this stuff. So that's how I became obsessed with it, I guess, and have made it my personal hobby to tell everybody who will listen about this story. And try to correct the record a little bit too, and whatnot.
This is your cause.
Yeah. This is the only thing I live for. So after this podcast, I will probably the wind demon will sweep me away into dust, Yeah. So for reasons that are unclear, the author of the story that was cited as the inspiration stated that this kid and his family lived in this municipality called Mount Rainier, which is also in Maryland in Prince George's County. So that's what we were all told growing up. And then, years later, after the films become a cultural phenomenon, other people start looking into this, the truth behind The Exorcist. There was an article written by a guy named Steve Erdman in 1975, and he based much of his article on this alleged diary that contained firsthand accounts of the exorcisms by one of the priests. So in this article from 1975, the boy who had not been named in the 1949 Washington Post article was referred to by a pseudonym. They called him Roland Doe, which is kind of a funny pseudonym because Later on, when I tell you what his real name is, it's like really not that far from it.
Oh my God,
so it's kind of funny.
Ballison Beagle.
That's right. Boland Doe. But yeah, so they refer to him as Roland in the diary, and that's what I'll use for most of this, just because it gets confusing otherwise. So Roland, the kid who was possessed, was said to have been born on June 1st, 1935, and lived in Mount Rainier with his mother, father, grandmother, and they were all Lutheran. They were like German immigrants in Lutheran. According to Erdman, who wrote this 1975 piece, Roland's possession by an invisible entity began shortly after he and his aunt Tilly began experimenting with the Ouija board in January 1949. So, check mark, 1 point for
that'll do it.
Accuracy. Yeah, I know.
Every
I know.
time.
Never, ever will I touch a Ouija board. I swear to God. Like, I just won't do it.
Growing up, I would go to sleepovers, and this one girl had one of the the pink one that they sell at Toys R Us. Yeah. She had that, and we would ask it does Nathan have a crush on me? And it would be like, yes. And we would all be like,
for sure, bestie.
Yeah. But the type of stuff that we were probably, that's a regret of mine. I shouldn't have been there.
No.
Yeah, it's so scary. And for those of you who haven't seen it, there's a great Ouija board video on our Webcrawlers YouTube of Melissa and I playing with a Ouija board.
So good.
Disastrous results for me.
I will say, not to give that away, but I really was not sure what was going on. I was like, what is this? And then I finally was like, oh, okay, I see what's going on.
Me either.
It was good.
Yeah, I was not sure what was going on either.
Yeah, I'd probably be pretty mad about that. You really
it was bad
handled
news.
it well. So the eventual possession was preceded by a period of quote-unquote poltergeist activity that began shortly after they started using the Ouija board on January 15th of 1949. And the kind of things that they were experiencing was that they heard a dripping noise in Roland's grandmother's bedroom. And then a picture of Christ on the wall of the same bedroom started shaking, and they heard scratching noises under the floorboards for 10 consecutive days from 7 p.m. until midnight.
Oh, God.
I hate that.
It's not great.
Into it.
It's not great. The day after the 10th consecutive day, which was January 26th of 1949, Aunt Tilly died of multiple sclerosis at the age of 54. So Roland's mother at first believes that the haunting, first of the house and then of her son, might have something to do with Aunt Tilly's death, which I don't really understand that because it seemed like it started before she died. But, I don't know. So, but just throwing that out there, it was not, again, Pazuzu innocent. It was maybe Aunt Tilly or Satan. That's the best those are the best leads that we have at this time.
Leave Pazuzu
or
alone.
Leading suspects, yeah. And so she would try to communicate with Aunt Tilly sometimes when this possession was going on. And I'm just going to read a long quote here. At one point during the manifestations, Mrs. Doe asked, "If you are Tilly, knock 3 times." Waves of air began striking the grandmother, Mrs. Doe, and Roland, and 3 knocks were heard on the floor. Mrs. Doe again queried, "If you are Tilly, tell me positively by knocking 4 times." 4 knocks were heard, followed by claw scratchings on Roland's mattress. So, doesn't sound great.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah. But so after this, it was mid-February, I think, Roland's mother arranged for a local Lutheran minister to have him, Roland, spend the night at the parsonage for observation. It was a different time back then, because when I'm thinking about what I can do to keep kids safe, having a sleepover with a priest is not near the top of that list at all. But
yeah, I'm sorry, not to be stupid, but what's a parsonage?
I guess it's I think Catholic priests live in a rectory.
Yeah.
So I assume it's like that, but
so it's like a church place.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So the Reverend, when this was happening at their kick-ass slumber party, he reportedly heard scratching noises and witnessed the bed vibrating, the tipping over of a chair that Roland was sitting in, and the movement of a pallet of blankets upon which Roland sat, which is that, I don't know. That just sounds weird to me, but I'm reading it verbatim.
What?
So whatever a pallet of blankets
Yeah, I was going to
is.
say a pallet of blankets.
Something they keep at the parsonage, I guess.
Yeah, I don't
Pedantic
understand.
of me, but
Yeah.
On February 26th, scratches or markings started to appear on Roland's body for 4 consecutive nights, after which they evolved into words that seemed to be scratched in by claws. And this part, the words part, only occurred when Roland was in the room with just his mother. It never happened in front of anyone else, supposedly.
Oh.
Interesting.
I know. Moms.
That's terrible. That makes me so
right?
sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was at this point that the family crossed the Christian sectarian Rubicon and first consulted with a Catholic priest, which was Father Albert Hughes of nearby St. James Catholic Church in Mount Rainier, Maryland, which is where they supposedly lived. That church also is allegedly haunted. I was told, was in a friend of mine's quince in like 8th grade or 9th grade or whatever, and the rehearsals for the dancing were held in the basement of St. James, and everybody was telling us it was haunted. So
you've been there?
Yeah, I have.
Did it feel haunted?
I don't know. Everything feels haunted to me, A spooky little bitch.
When you're haunted inside, everything feels haunted. Yeah. Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So this priest, Father Hughes, advised them to light some candles, maybe sprinkle some holy water around, which it's honestly kind of hot girl shit. So
that sounds like a really nice self-care evening.
Yeah.
Draw a bath, girl.
Yeah. Do you have any bath bombs?
Yeah. So then this is where things start to escalate, and we're no longer limited to just events within the house anymore. And this is where I want to give a big shout out to an award-winning local historian named Mark Obsaznik, who I will gush about him later on. But a lot of what I know about this is because of him and the tons and tons of work that he's done on it. He's great. Yeah. So this is a quote, something he wrote. Roland's mother claims that she was using the blessed candles when a comb flew across the room and extinguished them. At different times, fruit flew across the room, a kitchen table turned over, milk and food moved off a table, a coat and its hanger flew across the room, a Bible landed at Roland's feet, and a rocker in which Roland sat spun around. Roland was removed from school because his desk moved around on the schoolroom floor.
That's insane.
I'm the fact that he was in school the whole time that this was happening, up until now, is so we treated children so poorly.
Oh my God.
No, give them a break.
I actually saw, this has nothing to do with this episode, and we won't have to get into it at all, but I saw on Twitter yesterday someone post, that their school sent home a message. Did you see this, Rosie?
Yes. Yeah. I saw that, and then I learned that... Okay, well, you finish what you were saying first.
Okay, so I don't think I saved it, but it was this woman was my school sent home this thing that if your kid has a fever or sore throat or lice or...
Glandular fever and tonsillitis.
Fever, and tonsillitis, that they still have to go to school.
Send them in.
That it's
fuck it.
Yeah. So I guess they can add possessed by a devil to that. That there's no excuse to not go to school.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's the list that you can send your kid to school with. You are allowed to send your kid to school if they have athlete's foot, cold sores, glandular fever, head lice, tonsillitis, cold or cough, headaches, and sore throat.
Cool. So what can you give them home for?
It says only GI symptoms. Which
they don't want no wind demons
it's
in
a jacuzzi.
There.
Yeah. When it comes to school, it's just jacuzzi rules.
Exactly. Jacuzzi rules. 48 hours. Yeah. Oh, God.
Gross.
We put our children through so much.
Mm-hmm.
I feel when I was little, there were no rules as it came to missing school. Sometimes it'd just be ice cream and pizza day at home. You don't feel like going to school. And now it's just if you don't go to school, we will kill you and your family.
We have gotten in trouble for keeping our kids home, and they're we're gonna call someone on you, and it's
truancy.
okay.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's nuts. Anyway,
Anyways,
whatever.
Okay, Roland is at school, possessed
Roland's
as
at
hell.
school, not having active diarrhea that we know
Yeah,
of.
but he's possessed by a demon.
And so Roland's mom supposedly tried this holy water trick at some point, and when she was done sprinkling it throughout the house, she put the bottle down on a shelf and watched it fly across the room by itself. The diary also claims that attempts were made to baptize Roland into Catholicism during a several-day-long stay at Georgetown University Hospital, which, not to brag, but I have had both a colonoscopy and endoscopy there because Pazuzu ain't the only windy one, you know what I'm saying? I got problems.
You're going in both ends.
Yeah, I got
IBS, fam.
spit roasted by a doctor. Kinda cool, I guess.
Oh my God.
Cut that out.
I got spit roasted by a doctor.
And I paid them.
Take me out to dinner first, am I right?
They gave me apple juice after, I think, when I was coming out of the propofol haze. So that's
Yeah.
something. You know.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I've had a colonoscopy before and an endoscopy.
I've only had an endoscopy.
Oh.
Yeah,
And
we're
so you've
girls
had
with
them both.
issues.
You haven't lived.
Yeah.
You haven't lived.
Yeah,
No podcast or colonoscopy? Jesus
I know. I'm
Christ.
missing out.
So apparently when they tried to baptize him, he responded with rage, which I also think is fair because that's how I respond whenever my parents ask me if I'm going to baptize my kids, you know.
Oof,
So
gosh,
like I
yeah.
get it, you
Yeah.
know. This hospital stay is also where the first attempted exorcism took place, administered by Father Hughes of the haunted parish in Mount Rainier. So it's a lot of names to keep up with, and I apologize because
It's okay.
you know, I didn't make this story up. I'm just telling you the facts. The hospital initially tried to help Roland in the psychiatric department, but after they failed to improve his condition, Father Hughes was called in to perform the exorcism. During the process, Roland allegedly ripped out a bed spring and slashed the priest's arm with it. The exorcism ended unsuccessfully, and Father Hughes supposedly went into a long period of seclusion afterward, kind of like Yoda.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is like the Mandalorian.
Just like that. This is where the true story gets less interesting to me because the rest of it is said to have happened in like St. Louis, Missouri, primarily beginning in March of 1949. But I feel like I should finish telling
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah.
But so anyway, at this point, a couple of Catholic priests named Father Bishop and Father Bodern were brought in to turn up the heat on whatever entity was torturing Roland. On March 11th, 1949, the following was said to have occurred. After Roland retired at 11 p.m., Father Bodern read the novena prayer of St. Francis Xavier, blessed the boy with a relic, which was a piece of bone from the forearm of St. Francis Xavier, which, like, relics is like a whole nother crazy thing that could probably be an episode. Like, it's nuts.
what?
That's like really metal.
Yeah, it's just body parts all over.
Like that's hardcore.
If there's one thing I like about Catholicism, it's like the weird, spooky goth stuff that they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
really weird. So they fix this relic-encrusted crucifix under the boy's pillows. The relatives leave. Father Bishop and Father Bodern depart. Soon afterward, a loud noise was heard in Roland's room, and 5 relatives rushed to the scene. They reportedly found that a large bookcase had moved around, a bench had been turned over, and the crucifix had been moved to the edge of the bed. After the shaking of Roland's mattress came to a stop, only when the relatives yelled, "Aunt Tilly, stop!" So, you know. Again,
New
you know,
catchphrase.
Cut it out, Aunt Tilly.
Tilly, stop.
just 5 days later, the Archbishop gave Bodern the green light to begin the formal rite of exorcism. That night, Bishop Bodern and this other priest, Father Walter Halloran, started the exorcism with some prayers. This exorcism went on for weeks, well into April. Throughout this time, they were moving Roland back and forth between a relative's house, a rectory, and the Alexian Brothers Hospital. As the priests attempted to successfully complete the rite of exorcism, there were outbursts featuring excessive cursing, vomiting, urinating, and the use of Latin phrases, which he couldn't speak Latin, so that was unusual. Later, Roland was transported back to Maryland for a short visit, and on one of the train rides back or forth from Maryland to Missouri, he became maniacal, striking Father Bodern in the testicles and yelling, "That's a nutcracker for you, isn't it?"
No.
And I gotta say, for 1949, that's like a pretty good bit. Like that.
Yeah, he sounds like just
comedy.
like a really funny kid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like to think
I
he did like
him.
a little whackety schmackety doo. Danced himself off.
Yeah.
So finally, on April 18th of 1949, over a month later, the exorcism succeeded. And this is another big quote from Mark Upsasnik. As the nighttime ritual continued, Father Bowden forced Roland to wear a chain of medals and hold a crucifix in his hands and demanded to know who the demon was and when he would depart. Roland responded with a tantrum and screamed that he was one of the fallen angels. Bowden kept reciting until 11 p.m. when Roland interrupted. In a new masculine voice, Roland said, "Satan, Satan, I am Saint Michael. I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave this body in the name of Dominus immediately. Now, now, now." Roland had one last spasm before falling quiet. "He is gone," Roland pronounced, later telling Bowden that he had a vision of Saint Michael holding a flaming sword. 12 days later, he left Missouri and returned to Maryland. So, that's the story as it was originally known. This story gets embellished in the early 80s, after the movie's been out for a while, with 2 articles in a local paper called the Prince George's Sentinel. In 1981, an article by Spencer Gordon called The Exorcist, The Real Incident Involved a Mount Rainier Priest in 1949, which is not a compact headline, it was accompanied by this photo of an empty corner lot identified as the former site of Roland's family home on Bunker Hill Road in Mount Rainier, with the additional context in this article stating that the house had burned down several years ago. So this little taste of information led people in the area to speculate about where exactly this house had been and what exactly had happened to it. And then 3 years later, a local journalist named Brenda Caggiano wrote a little color piece
One
for
of
Halloween. She writes this piece for Halloween in 1983 about, she just kind of builds on the legend, interviews some locals, asks them what they remember about it. Nobody could remember the boy's real name, but the article puts this pin in the map and gives the address of 3210 Bunker Hill Road in Mount Rainier, Maryland. And that is where the lot had been that was pictured in the 1981 article. So by the time I'm this sentient little spooky dork in the 90s, this legend has been really festering and percolating and it's everywhere. And if you are the least bit into ghosts, you will hear this legend, and probably even if you're not. And then there's this resurgence in the legend around the 25th anniversary of the movie. And I just remember people started to talk about it again. And my mom she claimed that her mom, my abuelita, knew Roland's mother and would cut her hair because she was a professional hair cutter stylist. And so, it was this thing where it's these were community members that people knew, and so it became this very real thing to me. It made me feel very afraid because, and she couldn't remember the name either, which is weird. But then the pianist from the church choir that I used to sing in, which is not, worth...
Stop it.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That's another episode.
Ooh, yeah. She took a few of us to see this fabled lot where the house had been in, I think it was in 1998, around Halloween in 1998 after church one Saturday. And when we got there, I saw this white gazebo that had been built sometime in the late 80s or early 90s on the vacant lot. And this woman proceeded to give me the rest of the details as they were popularly known, which included that the house had been there, and after the exorcism, the family left, and then a little while later, the house burned down under these mysterious circumstances, possibly demonic circumstances, and then the town eventually constructed a gazebo there to sort of distract from this demonic legacy of the site and keep people from looking for it and stuff like that. So, and I remember standing there, and I was 14 or whatever, and getting goosebumps, being oh fuck, this is where it happened. I can really feel that. It's not at all where it happened.
Oh my god, that's really funny.
Yeah, and I went home that day, and that was, I think, the first or second time I had ever seen the movie, and I was very scared. So yeah, none of that stuff was true. This is where Mark Upsasnik comes in around the year 2000. This absolute legend took it upon himself to uncover the facts of this case by doing actual historical research,
work.
Historic newspaper searches, deed records, all this stuff. And in the process of fact-checking the legend, he also debunked it a fair amount. It turned out that the Doe family had actually lived in another suburb, which is called Cottage City. And Cottage City, Mount Rainier, Brentwood, Hyattsville, like all these, they're all like within a couple of miles of the DC border. Like it's a really compact suburban area. So he was in Cottage City. The only link to Mount Rainier was via St. James Catholic Church, which is actually where the priests really were from. And then he actually did go to Georgetown University Hospital. We don't know if he actually had a attempted exorcism there or not. Obsaznik also found out the identity of the boy and interviewed several people who had been neighbors, friends, and classmates of his. He published the results of all of his hard work, including an interview with Roland himself, in a 5-part article in Strange magazine called The Haunted Boy of Cottage City, The Cold Hard Facts Behind the Story That Inspired The Exorcist. And then he later expanded on this in 2007, I believe, in a book called The Real Story Behind The Exorcist. So, at the time, Obsaznik, like in 2000, he was very careful not to like dox this kid. He never gave the name, didn't show photos of him by himself to respect his privacy. Like he included a yearbook photo of his class, but he didn't point out which kid was him, you know, that kind of thing. But because this person is no longer alive, I feel comfortable saying that his real name was Ronald Edwin Hunkeler. The family lived at 3807 40th Avenue in Cottage City from 1939 until 1958. So they didn't really move away immediately after it happened. The house still exists. It's still there. And I make like everyone who's dumb enough to get in a car with me in the month of October go there usually. Like I remember when I started grad school just being like, hey, new people I don't know, you guys want to see The Exorcist? Y'all want to see a dead body? Yeah. And I have...
He's handsome.
Yeah. For the
Ooh.
Yeah, the Patreon.
Patreons, you know, you can see this little guy. This is a few years after the exorcism, obviously. But yeah, so
he's looking good. He's looking demon free and fresh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, you got that wind out of him. He took us some methadone or whatever. The mysterious burning of the house on Bunker Hill Road that is where the gazebo is now was actually completed under the supervision of the University of Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute with the cooperation of the Mount Rainier Fire Department. So there was absolutely no mystery to that at all. Like it wasn't like we got to burn this place down to get rid of the devil. It was just like, you know, this is a rundown house that has nothing to do with this story, and we'd like to burn it down to train firefighters, and that's what they did. No written record was kept of the alleged exorcism attempt by Father Hughes at Georgetown University Hospital, but it was verified that Ronald Hunkeler was admitted there under his real name on the morning of February 28th, 1949, and then released at noon on Thursday, March 3rd, 1949. So that's, you know, he really was there. That, you know, there's bits and pieces of the truth in that tale, but there's no evidence to indicate that while he was there, he like slashed the priest's arm. A lot of people that Mark Obsaznik interviewed said that they remembered him being completely fine and normal and, you know, coaching his CYO sports as usual, you know, during that time period. So like never showing up with an injury or having to call in sick or something like that because he had been slashed by a possessed, you know, child. Obsaznik also interviewed Father Halloran, who was involved in the St. Louis exorcism in 2000. And he kind of poked and prodded at it. He was trying to get the priest to sort of talk about anything really unexplainable that he couldn't, that he had seen. And the only thing that Halloran could point to was that he said he saw a bottle slide from a dresser across the room when there was no one near it, and he saw the bed moving. And then he kind of trailed off, and Obsaznik followed up with some other stuff and asked him about the spitting, the urinating, the vomiting, and that was, you know, supposed to have just been nonstop, right? And the response was pretty tepid. The priest just said, well, you know, the spitting was frequent, but it wasn't significant. There wasn't any vomiting or urinating that I can recall. So, you know.
I can recall. You'd remember.
I remember it every time, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I know when the last day I threw up was because I...
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, if somebody threw up around me, like
Right.
I can remember. I could give you a list of every kid that ever puked at school when I was growing up, because I am I don't go next to I don't hang out with them anymore.
Name them and shame them, Rosie.
Yeah. Patreon exclusive.
I
You're
feel
all the
bad.
people who have thrown up on Rosie.
Yeah. Oh, not even on me. Just
near
in
you.
the
just
vicinity.
in the same room.
Ooh.
I'll tell you, actually, I was at Universal Studios on Thursday, and I was on the literally the tram ride that just goes through Universal Studios and like shows you. Yes, and the woman in front of me was throwing up.
No.
Yes,
awful.
But here's what's weird though. She had a barf bag with her,
nice.
and there's not barf bags on the
just
tram.
came prepared.
So she came prepared. So I'm like, then I felt like
that's one
empathy.
of my IBS sisters out there.
Yeah,
you know?
no,
Yeah.
I like felt empathy because I was like, oh, this woman has a condition.
She just must be a barfer. Yeah, some people are just pukers.
Yeah, but I was like, oh my, and barf is my biggest phobia.
Me too.
The whole time I was like in my boyfriend's shoulder, just being like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And it's an hour-long ride. It's just like.
I would have been crying.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It was so bad. It was so bad. But I mean, I hope that girl's feeling better. But yeah, it was.
Me too.
So 3 days ago was the last time I saw someone barf near me.
Yeah. Oh, that's recent.
Yeah, I know. I'm fresh. I'm still recovering.
He also asked the priest about the marks on his skin and all this stuff, and he said, "Yeah, I saw some marks right on the skin. It wasn't the boy doing it himself, as far as I could see." And then he asked him if he had ever seen legible, letters, numbers, or words, and the priest just said, "It's kind of hard to tell." So. Not a lot of like hard evidence for this possession. Halloran also claims that he burned the diary. That was the source for the 1975 article, that he had the last copy of it and burned it. So if you can't tell by this point, a lot of the information that Obsaznik turned up from his research made him feel pretty skeptical that the kid was ever possessed at all. And, as much as I feel like I want to believe in all of this stuff all the time, but I also want to be skeptical too. So I'm kind of, I don't know, but I don't know how much time we have left, but I have some accounts from his neighbors and stuff that were interviewed too.
There's no time limit.
Okay.
Go off.
Okay. So he interviewed a couple of his friends, one of whom was described as being his best friend, in material from the 1940s. This kid was identified as being his best friend. So I don't know. He found some people who were pretty close to this kid at the time that this was all happening, and kind of questioned them and their memories of it, which I thought was really interesting. Alvin Kagi, whose parents frequently played canasta with the Doe family, described Ronald / Roland, which I'm probably going to get those confused, but it's the same person. We're talking about Roland Doe, who is Ronald Hunkeler. He described their whole family as kind of weird loners. He noted that they had been Lutheran and that they converted to Catholicism without much explanation, but they never discussed Roland being possessed, and they never used the term possession. They just sort of there was this vague allusion to him being sick that they would talk about. There's this group of 3 brothers, and this is the one of whom was Ronald's best friend, gave interviews to Mark in 2000. The older brother, who was born in 1926 and identified as JC, did not think that Roland was possessed. He saw a documentary about it, and he said, well, one of the things they tried to emphasize in this documentary was that he was spitting all the time. And according to JC, Roland and JC's younger brother, who were the 2 best friends, he said, I noticed one of the common bonds between them. They found this very clever way of doing it. They could spit with great accuracy up to 10 feet. They'd keep their mouth closed and raise their lips and spit through their teeth, and they somehow developed a way to do that. So he said, I don't think he was ever possessed. I think it was psychological. There are some interesting psychological aspects. They were these German Lutherans, and as an only child, I think the grandmother is actually a central figure. She played a very influential role. She had this old world superstitious background, and the mother got caught up in it, and the father was kind of not present. He was kind of in the background. So, this idea that these very religious people just got, a teenager starts being kind of a shit, and they're like, oh, Satan, I guess, and kind of get carried away with it. Yeah. BC, who was the best friend, described Ronald as an only child who went through anything but a normal childhood, smothered by his obsessively religious mother and grandmother who held deep interests in spiritualism and Ouija boards, shunned by his classmates at school, prone to tantrums and violent outbursts toward his family and friends, and exhibiting cruel behavior and even sometimes sadistic behavior toward other children and even animals. BC frequently said in his interview what a, quote, mean bastard Ronald was. He also talked about a vicious stray dog that Ronald had basically adopted. And so Ronald would call this kid BC to have him come over. And when he would get to the house, Ronald would open the back door and like sick the dog on him. The dog would chase BC. He'd run back to his house. And then when he got back to his house, Ronald would call him and laugh about it. So he was like,
what the
you know,
fuck?
Oh
kind of
my
not a
God.
nice kid, nasty kid, you know?
I was starting to feel bad for him, and now I'm like, okay, maybe
You know,
he was
it's
the
hard to-
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
And then this kid BC was supposedly there in school when the desk was shaking. And here's what he had to say about that. We were in 8th grade. It was the 48-49 school year, and we were in class together at Bladensburg Junior High. He was sitting in a chair, and it was one of those deals with one arm attached, and it looked like he was shaking the desk. The desk was shaking and vibrating extremely fast, and I remember the teacher yelling at him to stop it. And I remember he kind of yelled, "I'm not doing it." And they took him out of class, and that was the last I ever saw of him in school. The desk certainly did not move around the room like that book, which is, he's referring to this book called Possessed, said. It was just shaken. So, yeah, you know, take that for what it's worth. Obsaznik later detailed in his 2007 book that I mentioned earlier that Hunkler had ended up having a long career as an engineer at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. He was married and later divorced with 1 son and 2 daughters, and he died of a stroke on May 10th, 2020, just shy of his 86th birthday in Marriottsville, Maryland, a few miles west of Baltimore. So, R.I.P., Rip City.
Yeah.
So that's basically the stuff that I know about it. I have other thoughts about like the story and you know, why he made these changes, and I feel like it's worth mentioning that, like,
Yeah, tell us them. What are your other thoughts?
well, so I feel like I read this somewhere, but I don't remember where. But basically, like, you know, people are like, well, I wonder why he changed it from a boy to a girl. You know, why would he do that? And I had heard it kind of not super well explained in the past, but basically the idea that, like, well, it would be way more scandalous for a girl to be saying these filthy things than a boy, because, you know, it's acceptable for boys to swear and be profane, but for girls it's not. And so, you know, leaning into this like weird gender stereotype purity thing. But then I was just recently reading in this excellent book that I have nothing to do with, but think is worth a plug for anyone that's interested in this sort of thing. It's called It Came from the Closet, Queer Reflections on Horror, and it's by the Feminist Press, just came out. It's got essays about different horror movies written by queer and trans authors. And the first essay in the book is by S. Trimble, and they have so many interesting reads on this movie that, like, blew my mind, and I'm so glad I got to read it before talking about this. And one of those things is kind of tying back to that, what I was talking about, and kind of the idea that, like, this book was a reaction to, like, all these radical movements in the 60s. And so in the 70s, all the adults were, like, clutching their pearls about, like, the nice white girls who had ended up in the Manson family, and, you know, and, like, needing a return to American conservatism and patriarchal family values, and, like, all of that coming to a head in the 80s with Reagan, and, you know, like, so how all of these things were happening at the same time, and how, you know, that's kind of part of this too. It's like the worst thing you can think of is, like, there's this nice white girl and she doesn't have a dad, and she's being raised by some Hollywood elite single mom, and she needs a strong man like a priest to come in and get her life back on track. And it's like, yeah, it's, you know, so that's, you know, there's just some undertones in there that I think are worth mentioning. And, you know, I feel conflicted because I think it's a great film, and, like, obviously this iconic piece of, like, horror, and it gives some, like, sort of national significance to, like, the area that I grew up in with historically, which is interesting. But it's also, like, I don't know, you know, like, there's some not so great stuff about it. And then also, as Trimble noted, that it could be read as a metaphor for conversion therapy, which I think is really interesting, because you've got Reagan being drugged and strapped to a bed, and these straight white men are trying to make her normal again, you know, like the same way that they pray over people in church to, like, pray the gay away. So, like, kind of an interesting take on that. And, like, their essay is called A Demon Girl's Guide to Life, and it's just very interesting, so I highly recommend that.
I love that. I think it's actually one of the reasons that horror is my favorite genre is because I think it's a really great vehicle for, like, social commentary. Yeah. Whether really the director or writer means for it to be or not. Right. I think, like, in this case, the writer or director probably did not mean for it to be about those things, but it's so interesting for, like, the subtext to be viewed that way, or to have it to be like it's there it's their internal fears that are kind of being like represented on the screen, or even now, you know, people like Jordan Peele who are doing it more like deliberately. But that's why I think horror is so interesting, is because it's such a great way to like express our fears about society and what's going on, or just like, I don't know. Horror, I think, is like one of the most underrated and overlooked genres.
It doesn't get the credit it deserves for the like the layers. You know, I think the depth, that people see it as something that's kind of just like you know, very base entertainment. Which is just wrong. Like, you know, I've never really been a horror fan, but recently I've gotten more into it, and it's like way more than just being scared. You know what I mean? Or at least the best movies are, you know, like it's not just about like a jump scare, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are some that are like torture porn.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But then there are others, you know, like especially some of the older ones, you know, like Rosemary's Baby, or like some of the other that really give statements on like society and how underrepresented people are. You know, it's really great. And that book, It Came from the Closet, Queer Reflections on Horror by the Feminist Press, definitely something that I'm going to get and that everyone else should get as well, because that's really, really interesting. And I know that Shudder, if you have it, it's like the horror streaming service, also has a really great documentary on Black representation in horror, which is really cool as well. This was so great and so illuminating. Did you have anything else to share? I kind of just pushed us to the end for no reason.
No, I mean, I
thought that was so cool.
Yeah, no, I just, I mean, that's kind of it. I don't know. Rosie, did you have any? I mean, we were both raised Catholic, and I feel like that gives us some kind of weird connection to all this because of just how weird that being raised in that religion can be. You know, so
I feel like Catholicism is so rife with like the ability to be turned into horror. I think that, and like, you know, maybe more than other religions, like Catholicism, although like you mentioned, Dan, like has like this kind of like architecture and design element that has also been commonly associated with, you know, like there's obviously religion and horror have a lot in common with the devil and all that. But I think that like the imagery of a Catholic church versus like Presbyterian or Lutheran, where like I don't know if you've seen the memes about like a Catholic church is always like this gorgeous, like humongous, like well thought out, planned, designed, stained glass windows. Like it truly is like a very beautiful place. Most Catholic churches are. And then like a Lutheran church or a Presbyterian church is going to be like in a parking lot next to the Walmart, like in a, and it's just like folding chairs essentially. Like, so I feel like the imagery is something that is definitely like, I don't know, something to recall, I guess. And then also I think that my aversion to horror maybe like kind of came from that, because I was always so scared of, it all seemed a lot like very triggering. Real. Like it was all so real. Like the idea of exorcism, I was like, oh, well, yeah, like obviously they do that. Like that could happen to me.
That's real. Like they actually do that.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I was always like, well, let me avoid that. And also because I was scared that like, if I saw like the Catholic idea of God is kind of tricky. Like he like is gonna like screw you. It's almost like a genie where if you make a wish, they'll like try to make it happen in a way that's like horrific, like, oh, I wish my son would come back to life like in the monkey's paw. So I always had this idea that was like, if I do something wrong, or like if I like watch a movie that's going to scare me, like God is going to make that happen to me, you know?
Like a punishing God.
So, and also like I grew up as somebody with OCD, so it kind of like all ties together in that way. Like not every Catholic is like me, but I think that I definitely like, you know, was like, well, I'm not going to watch The Exorcist because it's like, that's real life. Like I was very much like
inviting that.
Like no
it's like
way.
The Ring. Like, it ended up happening to you.
Yeah.
It actually leads into my question perfectly, is like, I don't know about a lot about Catholicism, but like, how is mental illness accepted in Catholicism, or is it straight like you're exhibiting these behaviors, it's the devil. Like, right. I just don't know, like, what, because I'm thinking, like, was Roland probably mentally ill, and then they just assumed that he was possessed? You know, like, right. How is that accepted in Catholicism, or is it just kind of looked over?
I think it depends on how hardcore you are.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think
probably
back
different
then,
now than then.
Yeah, back then it was
way
definitely
more people. Yeah.
Right. Like back then they were basically still doing like Latin mass. You know, they were like,
it's pre-Vatican II, and
So I think that, I mean, you know, I think that the general perspective is like, and Dan, you know, obviously, if it's different for you,
I'm sure it's not.
But I think the general perspective is just like, pray about it. And also like this idea that if you're mentally ill, God did it for a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
But if it's really like, if it's a severe, like, but that's like depression and anxiety. But if it's a mental illness that presents in ways that are not more socially acceptable, like I think like schizophrenia or, you know, combative mental illnesses, that's going to be seen as like you're possessed maybe, or like you're a bad person because God says that you're a bad person or something like that.
No, totally. Like you've somehow done something wrong in the eyes of God, and now you're being punished.
Right.
So I think I mentioned this once on one of the call-in shows. I think I told a story that was like a ghost story kind of thing that my mom had told me growing up that had happened to her. And one of the things she said in that story, which like she would always say and feels like a very foundational part of like my childhood in Catholicism, was that when she would see this little like demon at the foot of her bed, she would think to herself like, oh, only sinners are afraid. So if I'm afraid, that means I'm bad. Like you're just, that's like, and I was telling my therapist about that recently. It's like, I wonder if you've internalized that. And I'm like, yeah, I think I might have. Like,
that's hardcore.
Like, like, so no matter what you do, like if you ever feel afraid,
fear is bad.
It's like, oh, you did something wrong. You deserve this. Like if it's happening to you, you deserve it. Like that's, you know, like that's how it works. It's crazy. And
it's so funny because fear is an innate emotion. Like it's a reaction. Like all animals get afraid. We're animals. Like fight or flight is like our reptilian brain, and we learn to cope with it. But it's our normal first instinct to be essentially afraid of everything that's unfamiliar. You know, it's not a deficit or a defect.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't actually heard that only sinners are afraid thing. That's really like kind of like deep cut Catholicism.
So maybe that had phased out. Maybe your parents didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that the thing is, it's like my parents were very like pretty normal suburban Catholics, like not, you know, we went to church every week, but like if we missed it, it wasn't a big deal. You know, we prayed before dinner, but it wasn't. But it, you know, my parents didn't push it that hard, and I still turned out like this. So it's like this religion is real intense.
You mean
like
perfect.
Well, thank you, but I mean, like, you know, very anxious about going to hell, like, you know, like
or purgatory, which doesn't seem much better.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny, and I want to preface this because I know like every so often we'll get a review of like just someone getting offended by. I mean, everyone gets offended by everything, but like. I love religion. I love God. I think doctrine is where sometimes things can get punishing and ostracizing. I think to me, like, I pray every day. Like, to me, like, God is love, you know? But I think, you know, where it gets harmful is when, you know, these religions just get punishing and instill fear in people to the point that you're just like immobilized and, you know, just don't want to do anything in fear of like screwing up and ending up in hell because you're different from what they like refer to as the norm, you know?
The baseline, you know, if we go by like what the Bible says that Jesus was actually about and like the things that the Catholic Church and Christianity in general claim to preach, you know, like love thy neighbor and, you know, treat everybody with respect and share what you have and to treat people who are different, you know, the disabled, with the utmost kindness and empathy. Like those are the things that like are true values of mine. And
Absolutely.
I definitely think that like, you know, in a lot of ways, like I don't have like I think that my parents especially like wanted to instill those values in me, and the church in America at least is like seen as the place to do it, regardless of whether or not what the church is actually sharing with the people in the congregation actually goes along with those values. You know what I mean? Like on paper it looks so good, and on paper I believe in it 1,000%, you know, like loving your neighbor is like the most important thing to me, but it gets kind of drowned out by, you know, like you said, like the doctrine, and then like the people that are in charge of the Catholic Church. And like, again, I don't want to offend anybody, but I think that we can all,
like my parents who take it too far, you know what I mean? Like there's just some people just take it too far.
Or that documentary, if you've ever seen it, Jesus Camp, which is one of the scariest documentaries I've ever seen about a kid's I don't even think it's Catholic. It might just be a kid's Christian camp.
They were like one of the like Southern megachurch kind of deals.
And they like burn Harry Potter books, and there's a lecture about how Harry Potter's the devil. Well, I mean, now Harry Potter. Listen, J.K. Rowling isn't.
yeah.
Now I get it. Now we can all burn her books.
Right.
But,
it's common ground.
Yeah.
Back then, it was for a different reason.
Yeah. This was pre her being controversial or wrong, but it's just like it's a really intense documentary about instilling fear. How they associate kind of like God with fear. Anyway, this was like an incredible and illuminating conversation. I loved how it started off with like the story of the Exorcist, and then just was like shooting the shit about religion and stuff. That was so cool.
Just bong ripping over here, you know.
That's what I'm gonna do when we hang up.
I'm gonna eat food. I'm so hungry. Dan, if people want to reach you, or if you want to be reached or viewed or anything like that, where can people do that?
Yeah, give Ghoul Talk podcast a Google. I think our URL is like anchor.fm/Ghoul Talk or something, but it's probably not. So if you just look it up, right. So check it out if you feel like it. We just talk about ghost stories and supernatural stuff, and sometimes review horror movies and things like that. But it's
good stuff.
Oh, thanks.
It's excellent content.
And more of that smooth butter voice. And Rosie, what about you? Where can people reach you, see you, if you want to be reached or seen?
That's hilarious. I love to be reached and seen. My Instagram is feelings stores, like multiple stores where you buy your feelings. And my Twitter is the same thing.
Amazing.
But
that's good branding.
Thank you.
Handles, you're ready to tell them.
It's an Animal Collective lyric.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, from the song Banshee Beat.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on. This was so amazing. You guys are huge in the Discord, huge in our hearts. And I feel so lucky for you guys that you guys came on today.
Thanks for having me.
I feel lucky to have been, kind of tacked onto this. I'm so grateful to both of you.
It was
I had a blast.
Special gift to me. Anyways, this is Allie, Dan, and Rosie. None of us are possessed. Pazuzu is innocent. Signing off. Goodbye.
An Erios original.
Powered by Acast.